idea here is that we have these two boards that will cover up the hole underneath the sink, and then when we're ready to cook or do something, it'll fold up, and then the top piece here will fold out, and we'll have a giant counter space in front of our sink to put prepware and drinks and stuff like that. So, see if it works. I don't know. That'll work. Alright, so these are some really cheap chisels I got at the Home Depot, and they're very dull, and really the number one rule of using a chisel is it needs to be sharp. So we spent a few minutes sharpening this a little bit, so that should hopefully get us through our next 3 cuts. Side note, the sun finally came out, so we got that going for us. But let's see how this sharpness did. So, seems better, still not great, but this cut, we just tested it out with our hinge, and even though it's ugly, you're not going to see it, because this guy fits pretty well. I'm happy with that. I can live with that. Let's do the next one. Yeah, that'll work.
Can I feel it? Oh my god.
Looks terrible, but it works. And the other thing that we didn't think about before we started doing this, the whole point was to make this flush. The recess for the screws is on this side.
Yeah.
So they sit nice and perfect there, but really the screw needs to go in this way. So it's still gonna poke up a little bit. It is what it is. We did our best. I probably spent about 2 hours thinking about hinges last night and Googling different hinges. So I'm pretty frustrated. I spent so much time figuring out these hinges in my head so that this would be, one, a smooth surface without any bumps here, and 2, there would be no gap. And I don't know what happened, but first when I put these hinges on, I had them flipped around the other way, and it only closed about that far, which is not helpful. So I flipped the hinges around, which lets it close all the way now, which is good, but now you have these 2 big bumps on your work surface when you're trying to cook, which get in the way. So you have to make sure you don't set like a cup or something on there. These are things that we can live with. It's just not what I had envisioned. I think it's still going to be really helpful to have this massive area to set things on while we're cooking, and we're going to roll with it. And at least now these screws will sit flush, but it is what it is. So now we're going to pop these out, give it a quick sand on both sides, and then we can apply some stain to it, and then once the stain dries, some poly. So we're going to get to sanding. We've got 60 grit, 120 grit, and 220. We're kind of skipping a few grits here, but this is what I had on hand, and it'll work. You can see the other side of the cedar is really rough. So we're gonna knock that down with the 60 and then come back with the 120 and the 220. We'll have a super smooth finish and then throw some stain on it. All right, we're actually going to use some 40 grit on this side because it's still pretty rough over there. Already you can see the difference here. Look at that. So, turns out I did have every single sandpaper I needed, but it's too late. So I guess we'll save those for another project. We got some tack cloth here. We're gonna get all the sawdust off, and then we're gonna give this a nice little stain. All right, we're gonna cover this beautiful lumber with some Danish oil. Big fan of Danish oil. Use it on a lot of projects. You can cover it with a polyurethane. You just have to make sure that you let it cure for at least 72 hours, I think, before you put a poly on here. So we're gonna put this little natural finish on here and let it cure for a couple days. We'll coat it and then we'll be good to go. All right, it's been 72 hours. We've got our boards all ready to go. They've been hanging out and curing. We're gonna throw a little spar urethane on there. I normally like to use the wipe-on poly. However, when I went to buy some, either we stopped selling it or we were just out of it. So I went ahead and just got some brush on. This is a spar urethane. So this is really good for outdoor use. Should probably do this in a well-ventilated area, but this is what I got to work with, so we're gonna enjoy the fumes and brush this on, and then in a few hours we can recoat it, let it cure, and we should have it ready for our trip this weekend. So these guys are finished. We're gonna go ahead and install the hardware, but there's a lot going on right now, a lot of multitasking going on. So we're gonna caramelize some onions for our dinner, and then we can install this and get it on the camper.
Or at least what they thought was a lot medical. Exactly. Yeah, that sometimes are interested in ways to expand your. Maybe these ancient people were onto something, and he began to. But when we're stolen someone's children, give them back. International trip in his head.
He got a hole in his head. He had to get a new one every day. Thank you so much for listening to our show. So pleased to be part of the Maximum Fun.
All right, it's getting dark out, but we got to get this thing installed. Unfortunately, I really did kind of have to rush this project, and normally it's not something that I would do, but it's just a counter that we can put stuff on. So if it's terrible and it breaks, then we can always replace it.
but for now, it is what it is. Let's do it.
All right, so it was really dark last night when I installed this. I was able to get it up with a couple of the lanterns, but I want to give you guys a little walkthrough and show you what this really does. So first, what it does is it kind of covers up underneath the sink there. The second thing it does is folds up as a counter, and then it folds out like this. So we put this little steel support under here to support the countertop. We definitely need to rethink that because it's just not strong enough. So this is not going to work, but this works really well. Gives us plenty of counter space. I've seen a couple of people online where they had, you know, like a little one here or something, but I think this is perfect for us. We can do dishes, we can cook, and it is strong enough to set the cast iron on, which is really important because what happens is we start cooking and then we take the pan off because we're finished and it's hot and we got to set it somewhere, and we usually wind up setting it on the cooler, but then what happens is we need to get in the cooler. So this is a really good solution for that. We can put all of our utensils on here while we're cooking. I think this will work really well. Do this, hang on.